Jack Daniel's is releasing its second release of its 10-year-old, and for the first time, releasing a 12-year-old. All this is happening later this month, and I was given samples of both and granted access to the master distiller, Chris Fletcher, to get answers to all of your questions directly from the man himself. So if you want to hear about it, stick around. So let's get into the background a little bit. Both of these releases are around 300 barrels each. All of these barrels were originally designated for the single barrel path, but were diverted for this program. The 10-year-old was barreled around June of 2012. The 12-year-old was barreled around September of 2010. They both spent their first 8 years on the top floor where the single barrels aged. Then they were moved to the lower floor for the rest of the process, just to reduce the rate of extraction from the wood so they wouldn't get too oaky, and to reduce the evaporative loss that they were experiencing in the hotter upper area. This is the first opportunity Jack Daniel's has had to release these higher age-stated products in a very long time. Chris explained that his grandfather started making whiskey at Jack Daniel's in 1957, and he never got to try anything this old because it was such in high demand back then that they bottled everything before it could get this old, which I found very interesting, and it made it more nostalgic for him to be able to work on a project that his grandfather just could never get to. Both releases are their standard 80% corn, 12% malted barley, and 8% rye. And both releases went through the Lincoln County process. So let's jump right into the 10-year. When I first started nosing the 10-year, I did get some familiar Jack Daniel's notes, but the nuttiness was wrapped in a sweetness that made it taste kind of like candied nuts, and smelled like candied nuts. The banana in this is not as much banana runts as I'm used to on some of the other Jack Daniel's products. It was more like a banana chip, if that makes sense. And I did steal that from Chris, but once he said it, I felt like it resonated with my palate as well. And so when you taste it, you're going to notice that age. There's a lot of like bitterness on this that makes it taste like a bitter dark chocolate. And I've had before where I've been able to bottle directly out of a barrel, and we got some char component in there, and I ended up with a piece of char in my mouth, and that kind of acrid barrel char flavor is present in this whiskey. There's also some smoke, and I got a little hint of spearmint, which is interesting because there's not very much rye in this product, but for some reason that stuck out just a little bit. It does taste very different from the last 10-year that they released, and when asked about this, Chris said that consistency is not the goal because they did not earmark enough barrels for these special projects for them to blend for consistency. So this is more of a special release. You're supposed to taste, batch variants. The proof on this is 97 proof. So obviously higher than the standard, Old Number 7 80 proof, but not nearly as high as some of the single barrel cask strengths that are out there. The MSRP on this is going to be $70. So, pretty interesting. But I'd say all in all, you can definitely taste the age in that whiskey. So let's move on over to the 12-year. And the first thing that I notice on the nose is that the 12-year has a much sweeter profile on the nose. I would even say in the direction of being floral. Chris didn't share that in any of the tasting notes. I haven't heard anyone else say that. But for me, this has a floral component that I get on a lot of like Four Roses or even some of the Bullet products that have that, floral, sweeter profile to them. So the nose is much sweeter. The banana doesn't stick out as much. It's more of like a berry, but caramel for days. A bit of nutmeg on this. Again, not a lot of rye in this, but very balanced. A little bit of smoke, some leather flavors, but the oak in this is much sweeter. It's not acrid as much as the 10-year. The 12-year is a much sweeter profile. And I found it interesting. Chris, the master distiller, said that this was his favorite whiskey that he has ever made, which blows my mind. I mean, when you think about, he's working and has been for years at a distillery that makes the second largest quantity of whiskey on planet Earth, and this is his favorite whiskey that he's ever made. It's proofed at 107. MSRP on this is going to be $80. But I'd say that in conclusion, the 10-year actually tastes like it's older than the 12-year. And I asked Chris about that, and he agreed with me. I think if you were given these two whiskeys in a blind, that you would incorrectly believe that the 10-year was older, because that barrel char flavor does stick out more, which is kind of a hallmark of older whiskeys. Something that I'd get in like an I.W. Harper 15 or Elijah Craig 18, something like that. You get more of that acrid barrel char flavor. And I think that the reason why that might be the case with these two is just simply because of proof. Taking the 10-year down to 97 proof, whereas the 12-year is still at 107, I think those extra 10 proof points left enough oomph in there to create a more balance between the sweet notes and the barrel notes. And so I just to kind of test that theory, I took some of the 12-year and I proofed it down with a few drops of water. And I did notice that kind of acrid barrel char flavor stuck out a lot more at the lower proof. So made me curious about what this one would have been like at 107. But in the best analogy that I can give you between these two would be if you've ever tried Weller Antique and Weller 12 side by side. The Weller Antique is fuller, it's more balanced, it's got more sweet notes, fruit notes mixed in with the flavors that come from the barrel, but the Weller 12 is a little bit lighter, a little bit more acrid, and it makes sense. But in this case, it's the younger whiskey that has that older flavor, which it's the reverse with Weller. So, but I'd say that this is a strong buy. Both bottles are a strong buy. I feel like all of the special releases that Jack Daniel's has been coming out with lately have really proved that this distillery has the ability to make world-class whiskey, even for traditional Kentucky bourbon drinkers, and these are no exception. So I hope that you found this review helpful, and I would like it if you would like and subscribe, ring the bell, pay attention to future releases that we have coming out. And as always, if you woke up this morning and you're unsure whether or not anyone loved you, just know that I love you, and I'll see you next time on Bourbon Real Talk.